You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday night post-game edition of the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined, as always, by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys, and this is presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. The theme of the day today, Dave, survive and advance. That is just what the Bills did in a 34-31 win over the Miami Dolphins yesterday at Highmark Stadium in the wild card round. And now they are on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who they will play at home this Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The Dolphins, beneficiaries of numerous Bills drops, poor usage of timeouts, and 3 turnovers, were somehow, despite only having one drive go over 40 yards the entire game, able to hang in there until the very end against the 2-touchdown favorite Buffalo Bills. Dave, your initial reaction, what was running through your head yesterday as that game was progressing rather slowly? That was a long one.
I was on the roller coaster off the bat, right? I mean, you had the Bills jump out to the early lead, and your stress levels maybe start to go down a little bit, and then, as has been the case a few times this year, you know, the teams have hung around, have come back, have kind of stayed in games, and the Bills have had a little bit of struggle of kind of finishing teams off at times this year. And ultimately in the third quarter, when Miami had the lead, at one point I was just thinking to myself, like, this can't happen, right? Like the Dolphins have basically done nothing on offense all day, and somehow they're leading this game. And I felt at that point in the game is, if the Bills could just get out of their own way and get the lead back, I felt pretty good that if they got the lead back, that was going to be enough. Didn't matter if it was if it was a touchdown. I felt like the Bills really just needed to get that lead back in the third quarter, and from there, I was going to feel pretty good that they were going to win the game. But it was a roller coaster of emotions. It was a long game. It took long. And
they literally had to extend the kickoff of the Giants and the Vikings to like 4:50 to account for how long this game took.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, we're going to get into it tonight, but definitely up and down. At the end of the day, more relief than happiness, I guess, initially. But now my focus is kind of shifted, and I'm definitely happy, and I'm definitely kind of trying to focus on, like, look, week to week, things can go very differently. And then obviously seeing, you know, taking the blinders off, if you will, if you want to call it that, and looking at other games around the playoff picture and seeing how it took a kind of miraculous play for the Bengals to end up beating the Ravens. We saw what happened with the Jaguars and Chargers on Saturday night. So weird things happen in the NFL playoffs, and it is about survive and advance. And by the way, very familiar with that phrase. There is a very good ESPN for 30 for 30 on NC State basketball, survive and advance. Check it out. But yes, survive and advance for sure.
Randy Hartman comes in and says, so everyone pretty happy with the game on Sunday? He says that obviously pretty sarcastically, because social media reaction to the game has not been the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Joyful, maybe. Jessica Tennis comes in and says, Josh did a really good job playing for both teams. And that is in fact true. I mean, if I just want to break down, again, the Buffalo Bills were 2 touchdown favorites heading in this game. I want to break down all the ways in which the Buffalo Bills allowed the Miami Dolphins to stay in this football game. Starts with the Dawson Knox drop in the end zone. The Buffalo Bills go up 17-0 as opposed to 21-0. That was the first mistake. The second mistake, the Josh Allen interception, the one where there was some form of miscommunication with John Brown. Tony Romo blamed it on John Brown. Eric Turner came out today and said, listen, the Bills run that route concept all the same. John Brown just didn't read what Josh was doing. Josh overthrew it. He never should have thrown that ball into that coverage. So it's probably more on Josh. We'll get into it. But either way, That interception allows them to go down the field and kick a field goal. You have Khalil Shakir dropping a pass inside of the 10-yard line. A touchdown on that drive would have put the Buffalo Bills up 24-6 heading into halftime. The next play was a 50-yard punt return that allowed them to put their first touchdown into, or they might have kicked a field goal on that drive, because then the next drive, Josh Allen throws a ball, bounces off of Cole Beasley, leads to an interception. All in all, 20-17 at the half, as opposed to the Buffalo Bills having should have been probably a 30-0 lead, or a 30-3 or a 30-6 lead. It's now 2017. Then you have a really good 3-and-out, sort of starting to breathe easy as a Bills fan. All right, we got 3-and-out. We'll get back on track here. 2 plays in, free rusher on Josh Allen. He fumbles for a Zach Sealer touchdown, and now you're down 24-20. Now the Buffalo Bills pretty much took it over from there, won the game from there by going 14-6 over the next quarter and a half. But if it wasn't for the drops, if it wasn't for the turnovers, all of which were preventable, we are talking about a 40-50-10 shellacking of the Miami Dolphins on Sunday, not a 34-31 game where we all almost have a heart attack. And it continues to show that the Buffalo Bills are their own worst enemy.
It's true. And, think about this team in this season, and, Ryan Sullivan of Cover One, joined us. We've known Ryan for a long time. He had a really good tweet a couple weeks ago where he's like, I don't know that this team's better than teams from 2021 or 2020, but somehow this team has found a way to win like almost all of these games outside of that Vikings game. And they still only have 3 losses on the season.
I found someone who said the Bills really took it personally that the media was harping on them for losing close games, so much so that they now make every single game a close game just to prove them wrong.
I mean, the Bills, obviously, we've said this many times, right? When they are a team that really, in the games where they've lost or the games that have been close, it's really more self-inflicted, right? I don't think, outside of a couple obviously huge plays to Justin Jefferson, the Bills still had a chance to win that game against the Vikings. And obviously the game early in the season is against Miami. It was very well documented. The Bills had only lost 3 combined games by 8 points, or 3 games by combined 8 points. Like, this team is very, very good. And the only times mostly when teams stick around in these games are when the Bills hand them easy possessions. And it wasn't even just the 3 turnovers as well. It was like the timing of some of these momentum shifts. Like you mentioned, like the one interception obviously was huge, but then like they get like a big punt return, or they get a big return on the interception on top of that. And these things kind of compound and then keep teams in the game. Skylar Thompson was like 40% completion percentage or something like that, like most of the game. And they get a cheap touchdown and a defensive touchdown. So it's like things kind of all fell in Miami's favor in this game as far as what needing to happen for them to have a chance to win. And it still wasn't quite enough. So if you're Miami, you're like, look, everything that happened that we needed to happen we just couldn't get out of it at the end. And if you're the Bills, you can look at it and say, like, we really didn't play our sharpest game offensively as far as the turnovers are concerned and some of the coverage things, and they still ended up putting 34 points on the board. So,
and Randy comes in with
thing.
and Randy comes in with a really good comment here, because I agree with him. He says, I know that by the numbers, this team is just as good as previous years, and in some ways better, but watching the games, it just doesn't feel that way. And I think a large part of that has to do with the fact that the previous 2 years we were healthy. So our star players were doing these star things, and they were doing it in a prettier fashion. This year, the Buffalo Bills are a little sloppier. They're making mistakes. They're winning uglier. But I think part of the reason why that's happening is Von Miller, torn ACL, Micah Hyde, that neck issue. He's out for the year. Jordan Poyer missing multiple games, playing games hurt. Ed Oliver's mistimed. Jordan Phillips is mistimed. Tim Settle is mistimed. Matt Milano is mistimed. Trey Edmunds is mistimed. Gabriel Davis has fought an ankle injury all year. Josh Allen's had a UCL injury. The list goes on and on. Mitch Morse and his concussion. I've literally just named like the entire roster of the Buffalo Bills, or at least all of their starters. They've all missed significant time. Trey White, Kaiir Elam, Dane Jackson, like the list goes on and on and on. DeMar Hamlin, like it's crazy the adversity the Buffalo Bills have gone through this year. We've seen teams get hurt as much as the Buffalo Bills do. We've seen it before. It happens to the Chargers every year. What happens to the Chargers? They usually flail out and miss the playoffs. This year, they were one and done in the playoffs. Last year, the Ravens were hit by the injury bug just as bad as the Buffalo Bills were. What did it do? They never even made it to the postseason. So what the Buffalo Bills have overcome and the adversity they've faced this year, it's absolutely incredible. As you mentioned at the top of the show, they've only lost 3 games and that they're on this winning streak that they're on. So kudos to them. I think that's why it looks ugly. Hopefully all of this adversity and this ugliness that we've played through helps us continue to win some of these ugly games against the Bengals, and then hopefully the Chiefs after that, and then hopefully on to Glendale. Hopefully all of that adversity, all of the backup against the wall all year, hopefully all of that, there's a reason for it. And because, and that reason is it makes us 100% battle tested heading into, this week and the weeks, hopefully following it, because who knows? Maybe this team wasn't as battle tested in years previous because of how healthy they were.
And I mean, it's not a great comparison, but if you look at the Patriots, right, of the 20 years where they had their huge amount of success, right, and the years that they won their Super Bowls, right, they didn't win a Super Bowl the year they went undefeated in the regular season. They lose to the Giants that year in the Super Bowl. They win a Super Bowl against the Rams early on in that Tom Brady era where they weren't favored to win that game. They were down 28-3 to the Atlanta Falcons, not the best version of the New England Patriots that we had seen over the years. And like you look at some of the teams that won those Super Bowls for the Patriots, and they weren't always their quote best teams, right? They just happened to play the games and win those games for that stretch of games. And that's something that we can look at. And again, like I said, it's a loose comparison, but you can look at the Bills team who's been really good for the last 3-4 years and say, even if this is not maybe the best Bills team of the last 3 to 4 years, this is still a team that can win the Super Bowl with the players they have. And obviously that pretty much starts and ends 95+% with Josh Allen, but they can still win it all. And it doesn't have to be pretty, as Greg said in the group chat, right? No one's going to remember like 34-31 Dolphins if the Bills are hoisting the Lombardi at the end of the season until we go back and watch the 30 for 30 years from now and like kind of know what the outcome's going to be and can watch it in comfort. But it's really not going to matter if they ended up winning the Super Bowl, how ugly these wins were in the playoffs.
Got a couple of comments here. Randy Harmon says, I was very glad to see Elam finally getting some playing time. And what do you know? He played pretty darn good. We're going to get to Kaiir Elam in a little bit. And RJ Melville coming in saying, I think they're winning despite their play calling. And he goes on to note offensive play calling. Again, something we're going to get into tonight as well. But before we get into the nitty gritty of the game and start to preview the Cincinnati game, as always, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. First thing I wanted to start off with tonight, Dave, is I want to start off with Josh Boyer's bold strategy. That's the first thing I want to talk about today before we get into some of the other things that were mentioned in the comment section. The Dolphins clearly do not have the personnel in the secondary with all the injuries that they're dealing with to handle Josh Allen. And that was pretty evident. So Josh Boyer, the defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins, decided to go a different route, not drop into the 2 deep shell, not play zone defense. He decided to essentially go all out, blitz Josh Allen for a majority of the game early and often. He went cover zero, press man at the line of scrimmage. Essentially, he was seeding Josh Allen in the Buffalo Bills offense about 400 plus yards and 30 points in hopes that by utilizing the strategy, by applying this pressure, the Bills would take lower percentage shots, which they did. They would turn the ball over, which they did, and it would allow them to maybe keep up. And for most of the game, they did. What were your thoughts on the Dolphins' strategy and the Bills' answer to it?
Well, I said in the pregame I didn't think they were going to go away from their bread and butter, which was that man strategy. And I thought that they were going to come in and try to make Josh Allen make quick decisions, maybe take some low percentage chances, which I thought, to be honest, was the Dolphins' best chance to win this game. We saw a little bit of that back in week 3. I think if you're the Dolphins coming in as two touchdown dogs with your third string quarterback, and you're really not likely going to win the game if you just allow, Josh Allen to sit back there with all this time and just kind of move his way down the field. And so I respect Boyer for the game plan because you knew that the Bills were going to get their yards and they were going to get points, but the equalizer is the turnovers, as it oftentimes is in NFL games. If you just look at the box score and you look at yardage and you look at things like that, I mean, go back to week 3, box score would tell you that the Bills should have won that game. And so I respect the game plan. I think that teams who have better offenses, who have offenses that they know can kind of score points, and we'll get to the Bengals here in a little while, are not going to deploy that same kind of game plan. But I think for the Dolphins and sort of how they were coming into this game, undermanned, huge underdogs, hoping for the turnovers, it worked out for them, even giving up the yards and points, and they were in it. So I respect the game plan.
Yeah, I respect the game plan too. And I know a lot of Dolphins fans want Josh Boyer out, and they wanted Josh Boyer out for a long time, but there has been a lot of injuries to that secondary. And I thought that was probably the best game plan that they could have had and they could have brought heading into this game. They also had a good game plan when they played the Buffalo Bills in week 3. Despite all of those yards, again, they forced the Buffalo Bills into mistakes. They did just enough to win the football game. It's hard to be perfect and play perfect defense against a quarterback like Josh Allen. I think over the last 2 weeks, though, both the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins have highlighted our inability to pass protect. And they have shown ways to other teams on tape that they can attack this Buffalo Bills offensive line in terms of pass protection. New England did it last week, utilizing sort of disguising the rushing 4, but disguising the 4 that were rushing. It's been pretty evident through advanced analytics and EPA per play that sending 5-man rushes at the Buffalo Bills is the most effective way to rush them. So now other teams have that in their back pocket, knowing rush 5, disguise the 5 that you're blitzing and where they're coming from. And last but not least, what Miami did that I thought was pretty effective and I thought made Josh Allen feel a little bit uncomfortable is their defensive tackles didn't try to work downfield. Their defensive tackles sort of stood in place at the line of scrimmage. And when Josh Allen tried to move up in the pocket and maybe try to run and look to run, I don't think he had that available to him because the defensive tackles were not pushing up field and past him. They were still there waiting for him, and it clouded his vision. It clouded his ability to run the football. So I think that those 3 things in combination, teams like the Bengals and teams like the Chiefs can utilize. And again, one more time to repeat, it's disguising who is blitzing 5, and holding your DTs at the line of scrimmage, not making them push up field. Those 3 things in combination have sort of thrown the Buffalo Bills for a loop the past couple of weeks.
Well, and you look at this and you say, okay, man-to-man coverage, and Tony Romo even mentioned this a few times in the game. Like, there should have been some opportunities for Josh to step through and maybe make some plays with his legs. But to your point, those DTs staying home, not pushing upfield too much, and getting sort of past Josh Allen and allowing those running lanes to open. I mean, they weren't there. There was a play where he had tons of grass in front of him, and he just wasn't able to kind of escape the pocket. It collapsed on him. He only had 4 carries for 20 yards in the game against a defense that schematically you would think with backs turned to the quarterback, that he would have had some chances to make some plays with his legs. Now, he did have that big third down quarterback draw, that design draw to get them that first down, which was crucial at that time in the game, but not a lot of running from Josh Allen in this game either, only 4 attempts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he 7 sacks surrendered. Like, to me, the Buffalo Bills didn't have enough answers for cover 0. They had answers, don't get me wrong. I mean, 400 plus yards. They, scored 34 points. Allen made some big throws down the field, but it seems like the Buffalo Bills just did not have, like I said, an answer to that all-out blitz. What really stuck out to me was the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter, we have a 3-point lead. We're trying to milk the clock. They come back with that cover 0. You have a bomb to Gabe Davis. You have Josh Allen. I don't know if it was considered a sack, but he dropped back, was pressured, got back to around the line of scrimmage, was tackled. The Buffalo Bills punted the ball back to the Miami Dolphins. Now, there's a lot of mixed feelings about that drive. You have a bunch of people, WGR this morning, a bunch of people who were ripping that drive to shreds, absolutely ripping it to shreds, saying how awful it was. You have Eric over here at Cover 1 saying, listen, Gabe Davis was open. The Buffalo Bills just didn't execute. And that was Josh Boyer's plan. It's a lower percentage throw. It's hard to execute. Second one, no one was open. It was more of a throwaway. And then third down, what happened. So it wasn't as bad of a drive in Eric's mind. But at the end of the day, when you're blitzed 52% of the time, according to NFL Next Gen stats, and you chuck the ball deep 11 times, the most by any quarterback in a game this season, that tells me your go-to response to an all-out blitz is a very, very low percentage play. And on those 11 passes, you had 4 completions for 139 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. So there was some success. 4 completions, 139 yards, and a touchdown. There was a little bit of failure with that interception. And then there was 7 incompletions on top of that. The Buffalo Bills needed some higher percentage. They needed some higher percentage options for that cover 0 blitz. Now, the question that we'll never know the answer to, is that on Josh Allen because it was there and he wasn't taking it? Or is that on Ken Dorsey for not scheming it up? We'll never truly know the answer to that question.
We won't. And like against that team, and like we've said, against more inferior teams, I think this team, whether it's Josh Allen, whether it's Ken Dorsey, whatever, are willing to take more low percentage chances because it just takes 1 or 2 of those to almost essentially put a team away. Now, it didn't work out that way in this game because you had the turnovers and some of the big returns, but like in a game where you play a clean game and you're not turning the ball over and you're taking some of those low percentage chances and you're taking several of them, if you hit on 1 or 2, that's probably going to be fine. But you do need to be able to show that you can do more than just that when you're facing the blitz. And I mean, we'll see what happens, this week against Cincinnati, but I'm expecting quite a different game plan from Cincinnati. Yeah. The Patrick Mahomes game plan, if you will, that they've deployed on him a couple times now. I expect that against Josh Allen, but I know I'm getting ahead of myself there, but yeah, I guess we never really will truly know. We can go back and look at all 22 plays and see like guys have been open. You also have to look and see where Josh's eyes and where he starts his kind of progression, if plays like that are even possible, right? A lot of times these guys come open after the ball's thrown or after the decision's made. So just keep that in mind.
All right, let's transition here and let's keep it with Josh Allen. Joe Marino had a sort of a nickname for Josh Allen on his podcast this morning. He said Big Game Hunter Josh Allen showed up. And I want to talk about that like a little bit, because with all of his success came a lot of failures that sort of kept the Dolphins in it. And I want to sort of break down sort of play by play some of these key plays here in the game and assign responsibility for what exactly went wrong. Some of these big plays that were failures that allowed the Dolphins to stay in the game, they were not on Josh Allen. Dawson Knox's drop in the end zone is not on Josh Allen. I mean, maybe could the throw been a little higher, but Josh was throwing on the run. That's really on Dawson Knox. You got to catch that football. It's 21-0 if Dawson Knox catches that football. Khalil Shakir inside the 10-yard line. That ball is as money as it needed to be in that situation. You're Khalil Shakir. Apparently some people were saying the sun on that side of the field might have been an issue. I don't care. You got to catch that football. That's not on Josh Allen. That would have put the Buffalo Bills up like 28-0 if the combination of Dawson Knox and Khalil Shakir catching those balls, the Buffalo Bills could have had 30-point lead heading into halftime. Those are not on Josh Allen. What's on Josh Allen? Underthrowing Gabriel Davis when he was open and he had beaten his corner on that drive we had just been referencing. And you also have 3 turnovers. So let's take a quick look at these 3 turnovers. Let's start with the John Brown one. Now, Tony Romo says it's on John Brown. It was a miscommunication of some sort. You know, Tony Romo said that John Brown should have cut his route, gone upfield. Josh Allen essentially he completely obfuscated blame from Josh Allen. Said it wasn't on Josh Allen, it was on John Brown. He said it multiple times. Tony Romo was a little too pro Josh Allen in that game. It felt very Collinsworth, Mahomesy. I didn't like it even as a Bills fan. Thought it was a little over the top. I can see a lot of national people or fans watching the game starting to resent Josh Allen because of the way Tony Romo was like essing him off that game. Like, so again, I don't know how much I buy into John Brown being responsible for that pick. Kendall did a great job today of breaking that play down. Josh Allen had an underneath curl for a 4 to 5 yard gain right there. The running back leaked out. He was right over the middle of the field. Josh could have hit him. The guy could have turned upfield, ran for 4 or 5 yards. It was 1st and 10. Instead, he chooses to take the deep shot. He knew there was a DB over the top. To me, that's 100% on Josh Allen, despite the fact that there is a loud group of people on social media who want to blame John Brown or don't want to blame Josh Allen for that play. What are your thoughts on that John Brown pick?
I mean, it would be hard for me to blame John Brown just seeing where the ball ended up. And Tony Romo was talking about like, well, John Brown needed to go to the other side or kind of push that towards the boundary. And if you look at where the throw ended up, like that wouldn't have resulted in a completion. I'm sorry. Like I will believe that throw would not have resulted in a completion, even if John Brown pushed that towards the boundary. The throw was basically like, it would have had to have been a throw where John Brown was past his man and it landed in the bucket. I don't think there was a situation there where him pushing it either further to the inside or pushing it to the boundary, as Tony Romo mentioned, would have resulted in that play being completed. So, look, again, I think I would agree. I agree with Kendall on this. I think Romo was a little, very effusive of Josh Allen in the praise, and like I'm fine with that. But like I think that throws on Josh.
Yeah.
To me, that throws on Josh, and especially in the situation you're in, like you don't even need to make that throw. And I understand like taking the chance, but that aside, I don't think it's on John Brown.
Yeah, and Alan Collins comes and says, "It just me, or does it seem like Josh has completely lost the use of his safety valve?" Some weeks it does feel like that, and it's strange, right? Because you don't want to take what makes Josh Allen great. You don't want to neuter it, right? Like Rick Dennison neutered Tyrod Taylor. He ruined him. And, Tyrod Taylor, who was having a couple of sort of decent years here and there, was just so completely afraid to take any chances or throw the ball down the field towards the later end of his career in Buffalo that he completely lost his confidence. He completely lost his mojo, and he's sort of never gotten it back. And I'm not saying Tyrod Taylor is some elite quarterback or anything, but he wasn't the same after he left Buffalo. He had a good little run there in Buffalo, and then it sort of fell apart on him. But like I said, Josh Allen picks something every offseason to work on. I think this offseason he needs to pop in that Brady tape, and he needs to study sort of that death by 1,000 paper cuts technique and be more willing to take the check down because, again, we want to blame Ken Dorsey. Most of Bills Mafia want to blame Ken Dorsey in order to not have to blame Josh Allen. Take a look at that Cole Beasley pick. Number one, it was just a great play by the defender. Xavier Howard got his arm in there, knocked the ball loose. It popped up in the air. Javon Holland picked it off. It was a great defensive play. Josh Allen put the ball exactly where it needed to be. 100%. He put the ball where it needed to be. So it wasn't a bad throw. It was a great play by the defense. But again, Kendall did a great job today on social media, on Twitter, of breaking that play down. It was 2nd and 10. And there was once again a running back who creeped out into the middle of the field between the hashes and did that little curl and was sitting there in an open zone, and on 2nd and 10, he could have dumped the ball off to James Cook for 5-6 yards and lived for 3rd down. He chose to fit that ball into a super tight window, and even though the throw got where it needed to be, the defender made a nice play, popped up for a pick. So again, we want to blame Ken Dorsey, but the safety valve was there, and Josh Allen chose not to take it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something where part of me thinks like this could all be a blessing in disguise because the Bills can go back and look at this game, and I think they've probably got a lot of things on tape that they can go back and look and say like, look, this was available, this was available. But it's also going to be maybe difficult given that the type of defense they played against, and they're going to probably have to go back to other games besides this one to maybe get some learns. So I don't know. Like, it's going to be really interesting to see how they bounce back. And we're talking about this, like, obviously in a very sort of critiquey way because the team still ended up, Josh still threw for over 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, right? So, and Walter asks, who is Allen's safety valve? What short passing game has anyone seen this year to think it still exists under Dorsey? We saw Allen run short passing games for 2 years now, nothing. That's on Dorsey.
And what I want to say to that is listen, I just gave you 2 examples. Now I can't pull it up right here on screen. I apologize for that. But if you go to my Twitter, Kendall did a really good job of breaking down the John Brown and the Cole Beasley interceptions. There was a wide open underneath option. So Ken Dorsey schemed somebody open for Josh Allen to dump the ball down to. He chose to make the play further down the field. Now, you want to say that's on Dorsey, and while schematically I don't agree with you, I will say that Ken Dorsey and his philosophy seems to be to take more risks than Brian Daboll took. He seems to prefer Josh to push the ball down the field more than maybe Brian Daboll did. So maybe Ken Dorsey philosophically is playing into Josh Allen's worst habits. Maybe he doesn't have the relationship that Daboll did with Josh Allen, where he can put his foot down, tell him to take a deep breath and hit the dump off. I can agree from that standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, from a mindset standpoint, that Ken Dorsey is sort of playing into Josh Allen's worst habits, but I don't know if I can buy it from a schematic standpoint because we see those guys underneath and Josh Allen is choosing not to take it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, right? Because there are some schematic things that I find a little bit of a head scratching with Dorsey at times. However, in those situations that you mentioned, there was an option, but I do think that part of the role of being the offensive coordinator isn't just about schematics, right? So like you have to have like a mindset that's going to essentially be in the mind of your quarterback. And if the quarterback takes the mindset of what you have and your mindset is to take risks and to push the ball down the field, and that's the kind of mantra you're pushing in meeting rooms and things like that, then can you really blame Josh Allen for doing that if that's what his coach is telling him to do? Now, again, we're speculating a bit here, but there has been probably more of that this year, especially in the red zone than in years past. So, and again, Dorsey, we knew he's under a lot of pressure this year. A lot of people thought maybe he wouldn't be, but first year play caller taking the helm of a Josh Allen-led offense is not, it seems easy, but again, there may be situations where he's maybe relying on Josh to do too much and relying on that big playability, and that's fine. And Carl says that's why Josh wanted Ken Dorsey's OC because I see eye to eye and both want that. Yeah, I mean, there's some truth to that. I think they have a good relationship. There's no denying that. But there are times where you would like to see them just kind of like demoralize a team and just kind of pick up first downs and just like deflate a defense.
And, RJ Melville comes in and says receivers running conflicting routes, no motion, no play action. Then you watch Daboll with Jones and it makes me sad. Don't get me wrong. I understand that, but we weren't retaining Brian Daboll. So the fact that Ken Dorsey is having all of this success, despite the fact that he's doing things that you don't like, to me, like I was having this conversation with people on social media to the last couple of days. Like the Bills are going to have to sit down this offseason and ask themselves, Do we want to retain? They do this every offseason, right? They did it in 2017 with Rick Dennison. The Buffalo Bills made the playoffs in 2017. They sat down and said, do we want to retain these coaches? Are we on the right path? They sat down. They decided that with Rico Dennison, they were not on the right path. They went out and they hired Brian Daboll. The Buffalo Bills, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott will sit down this offseason. They will have private conversations. And the first thing that will probably pop up is, all right, the thing that makes our team operate, the thing that makes our team tick, this offense. Do we like the path it's heading down under Ken Dorsey? If we don't like the path that it's heading down under Ken Dorsey, do we think he is the guy with an off season to course correct, develop, to grow as a play caller, because he is a first-time play caller, and come back better next year? Incorporate more of that stuff that Brian Daboll incorporated, or do they have to go in a new direction? I almost guarantee you their decision is going to be to continue on with Ken Dorsey, and I would agree with that decision to continue on with Ken Dorsey. I think you probably have to give him this offseason to go out, to self-reflect, to look at the tape, because having a whole offseason to do that is completely different from being in the middle of that week-to-week grind, and there have been a ton of injuries to deal with this year, especially Josh Allen's elbow threw a loop into a lot of things. So again,
well, and
I'm
you
team
reflect on
retaining
your
Ken
own
Dorsey.
decisions, right? You're able to reflect on
Mhm.
your own decisions and your own
Mhm.
calls. You're not trying to figure out like what someone else did and see if your things
Yeah.
will work. You actually have now a full season's worth of what you did as a
Yeah.
play caller that you can go back and self-reflect. So I do think it makes a big difference.
And, on top of that too, offensive line pass protection has not been great. Could that be on him scheme-wise? Yeah. Could that be personnel? Did like Brandon Beane not do enough job putting an offensive line in front of Josh Allen? That could be an issue too. Second, like wide receiver drop rate has been pretty high on this football team. Wide receivers not catching passes. That's a compounding issue as well. Guys not getting open very well in man-to-man coverage. That's another thing as well. But again, that would go towards scheme. Like you got to scheme guys open if they're not getting open in man-to-man coverage. So that might go towards the negative side of Ken Dorsey. Walter Scales comes in and says, fair point, Judge. I don't agree with you a ton. What you said, I guess my issue is that we need Dorsey to rein in Allen like a good OC typically does. And yeah, again, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know if that's the issue, but to me, from the outside looking in, that's what, the issue looks like. Jessica Tennis comes in and says, it's the struggle between working within the offense and chucking it when you see somebody open downfield. I would agree with that. Charles G comes in and says, Dorsey has been overwhelmingly successful for a first-time coordinator and play caller. The statistics, the analytics, and all that stuff would agree with what Charles has to say. Ralph Wilson Sr. says, I want Dorsey on the sidelines where all the big boy offensive coordinators are. There they can look at their QBI and tell them what's up. And RJ comes in and says, why can't they just run more Daboll concepts like they did the first half of the year? It's been working since the end of 2019. Doesn't make much sense to me. Go with what works for this team. And again, they said they took a bunch of those Daboll concepts out because there was no Cole Beasley. So that might have played a role in it too. They just didn't have that third receiver that they felt comfortable with, Isaiah McKenzie. And again, that could go to personnel. Brandon Beane didn't give Ken Dorsey the personnel that he felt comfortable running those concepts with too. So again, there's a lot in play. We don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but it's definitely, this is going to be one of the topics of conversation over the offseason. I like this comment here from Brian P150H. Dorsey and Josh need to rewatch their game versus the Rams. That was, to me, that was their best offensive game of the year. And it was the first offensive game of the year. So
seems like so long ago. It doesn't even feel like this season almost.
I almost feel like the Pittsburgh game gave this team such an ego, right? Like, didn't that Pittsburgh game give Josh Allen in this offense such just like an ego or an arrogance to them where they feel like they can just bomb it out and play it like it's a video game? Because they had so much success doing it against the Steelers, and they've been trying to do it week in and week out since then.
I mean, but they've had other games. Well, maybe not this year, but like they've had other games where they've been absolutely phenomenal offensively. And like, yeah, I mean, the Steelers at that time, they weren't playing great. Obviously, we know they ended the season much better, but again, you point to that game and you're like, well, gave him some arrogance, some confidence. But again, like it doesn't fully add up to me, because then in that game, you saw like an emergence of Khalil Shakir, and then he kind of, went back into the shadows a bit. So it's like, what really week to week were they taking? I don't know. And that's where you kind of go back and you say, look at that Rams game from week one, and you're like, man, I'm definitely not saying I want Josh to be
And
Kirk Cousins.
this is where it gets difficult, right? Like this is where the conversation gets difficult. Where's the line of I don't want my quarterback to be reckless and chuck the ball and take low percentage shots with I don't want Josh Allen to stop being Josh Allen, because then he turns into Kirk Cousins. Like, where's the line? And you got to find the balance and you got to find the line. And I feel like Josh and Dable had that balance and they had that line. And right now, Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen maybe don't have that calibration yet. Like, they haven't calibrated yet. So that's a good point by John. Like, I don't disagree. Like, that's what makes this conversation so difficult, right? Like, that's what makes it so difficult, because you feel like if you veer too much to the conservative side, you feel like you're taking away or you're neutering what makes Josh Allen Josh Allen.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. I mean, like, Kirk Cousins' skill set and arm talent and everything he does is not in the same stratosphere as Josh Allen. And so it is a fine line to walk. And that's part of the allure of the NFL is that week to week, like, coaches and players have to adjust and kind of game plan and figure out what to do that week. And you're not always going to get the same team week to week. And so, and Dan says Josh has been hitting a shot or two a game. We saw him hit Diggs now in back-to-back games.
He hit 4 big ones this game, but guess what? Yeah. He attempted 11. That's where we talk about the balance, right?
Well, see, and I don't hate that if you're not turning the ball over. Like, I don't hate to me, when you compound a low percentage plays like that with turnovers, that's where I get uncomfortable. If you're not turning the ball over and your defense is playing well, like, by all means, take shots. Like, cool, I'm fine with it. But if you've had turnovers and you're struggling against a team that you should be handling, situational football to me then comes into play and says, like, we might have to make some adjustments here in game. And so,
To close this out, just a couple of really good, comments from Walter and Robert here that I'm going to read off. Walter says, how much of Dorsey's success is because Allen is a top flight QB? I don't think Dorsey has been bad, but at the same time, I'm hesitant to say he's been outstanding. That's again, a good conversation to have, a conversation that we've had here on this show. And then Robert comes in and says, he's a first year play caller. He was also immediately put Allen on Mahomes' level after the playoff game. He's a year younger in his development. Makes sense. He's struggling to rein in the big play. So we've talked about Josh Allen for a good chunk of this show now. So we're going to transition now just to switch things up. I want to go to the defensive side of the ball, and I want to talk about one of my passions, and that is pumping up Kaiir Elam, because Kaiir Elam showed up in a big way. I just want to prepare everybody listening right now. And Dave, I want to prepare you. I'm trying to mentally prepare myself. If Dane Jackson is healthy next week, I think he's going to start over Kaiir Elam. And I hope along with hopefully your support, I'm gonna absolutely riot if that happens, because Kaiir Elam went out and he absolutely balled out. He allowed 1 catch the entire game. He had a huge interception that helped turn the tide back into the Bills' favor, and he had the pass breakup to end the game on 4th down. He was going toe to toe with the likes of Tyreek Hill. That pass breakup was an absolutely amazing play. Playing man-to-man defense versus Jazicki on a crosser to close out the game. What were your thoughts on Kaiir Elam, and should he be starting next week like he should have been all year?
Yeah, I think he should be. I mean, what happened at the end? I saw he kind of got banged up. Was he no worse?
I think he just got the wind knocked out of him.
Okay, yeah.
That's all that happened.
So, look, obviously played a ton of snaps in this game because of Dane Jackson getting hurt, but seen several people mention on social media today, like even the likes of like Pat Moran and others who are very in tune with kind of what's happening with this team. Like, Kaiir Elam needs to be playing, and he needs to be playing a lot more. And look, the Bills had no problem giving James Cook crunch time snaps at the running back position. Like, the rookie thing it's over with at this point. Like, we're in the playoffs now. He's had a whole season. I know he's had injuries, so I'm not trying to say that he's played every game or had like a full season's worth, but and Allen says Kaiir has been the biggest question mark from the Bills defense. Like, I just don't get why they aren't. I assume he means aren't using him.
Yeah.
Unless he really means he has been the biggest question mark. And he doesn't know why they are.
I think he means why they aren't using him.
Yeah. So I agree with that, assuming that's what he meant. And came up with big plays, right? He came up with big plays. Athletically, we know he's probably the most talented athlete in the group.
That interception proved it.
Yep, the interception proved it. And again, Trey White, he's looking better and better each week. If you can get a boost from having Kaiir in the lineup and then still get, solid play from Dane Jackson, you need to take some of these small silver linings and kind of like build on that as you start to head into these games against the Bengals and hopefully beyond, because you're going to need that. You're going to need that group to play really, really good next week against the Bengals to have a chance to win that game. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, same here as well. And Charles G says we'll need his size and length versus Chase and Higgins. And I 100% agree. I just have this awful feeling in my gut that if Dane Jackson is healthy, he's going to be starting corner for the Buffalo Bills next week at the Cincinnati Bengals. Dave Arizi says Christian Benford has to play also. I don't really think Christian Benford has to play. Like, that one doesn't bug me. I'm more than okay unless someone gets hurt. Just sort of stashing Christian Benford for 2023. He's been out for weeks now with an injury. I think Elam is the one who deserves to play. And if it's Trey White and it's Elam and it's Teron Johnson, there's nowhere on the field. I don't want to be splitting reps for people anymore. I'm done splitting reps at CB2. So again, like I'm more than happy preserving Christian Benford for 2023. Maybe if Kaiir Elam shows out the rest of the postseason, maybe start cross-training Christian Benford at safety a little bit, because we have, a guy who's a pending UFA that might be important in Troy Garmin. You know what I'm talking about. It says Benford is probably next year's safety replacement. So he knows exactly what I'm talking about there. But yeah, Kaiir Elam needs to be in the starting lineup. Please do the right thing, Buffalo Bills. Let's continue on with the defense, do a little bit of arrow up, arrow down. I want to stick with the positives here. Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmunds were everywhere in this football game. I put out a sort of informal poll, because it wasn't a poll. It was just sort of like a statement after the game, like Edmunds or Poyer, pick one heading into 2023. And I think for the first time this year, it was unanimously Tremaine Edmunds, because he was everywhere on the field. Him and Milano, coverage, sideline to sideline, creeper pressures. They were doing it all. They made Skylar Thompson's life a living hell. Those two played a huge role in the fact that the defense, despite the Miami Dolphins having the ball in plus territory so many times, holding them to not even 31. I'm bad at the math here. 24 points in this game.
Yeah, 24 points in this game. And like, just look at these drives from Miami in the second half. Punt, interception, punt. Then they had the touchdown, punt, and downs. Like, so one scoring drive for Miami on offense in the second half, which obviously the defense have been playing great all game, but Edmunds and Milano at the middle of that, like, okay, you can nitpick Milano for that one missed tackle on the 3rd and long. But ultimately, like, if you don't have those guys, like this could go a different direction. Edmunds has been absolutely flying around the football field this year. Troy says Edmunds is the pick right there in that comment. RJ's, Troy says Edmunds is a pick, but hard to argue with this team being undefeated when Poyer plays. And I get that. But again, they also have only lost 3 games by combined 8 points. So like, I get that statistically they're undefeated when Poyer plays, and obviously would love to have both of them back, but it gets to be a difficult conversation when you start talking about the future of the team 4 or 5 years in the future, and cornerstone player like that. I think before the season, everyone would have said Jordan Poyer, right? And now it's like I'm not saying it's flipped completely the other way, by the way. I'm just saying now it's a legitimate sort of like, there's a faction for Poyer, there's a faction for Edmunds. Like, it's pretty split. So he deserves it. He's probably going to get top 5 linebacker money. And it'll just be interesting if the Bills are the ones to give him that money.
Arrow down, if I'm giving one arrow down to the defense today, it's got to be the pass rush. I mean, we got to be real. This team can no longer apply pressure with 4 guys. Going back to week 1, what were we absolutely salivating over week 1 and licking our chops, thinking about what the rest of the season was going to be like? The fact that with 4 guys along the defensive line, we could apply ridiculous pressure to the quarterback and just drop everybody back in his zone coverage to look for picks. Like, that was what the Buffalo's defense could have been. But then reality hits. Von Miller is out for the season.
Mhm.
Gregory Rousseau dealing with an ankle injury. Boogie Basham has dealt with injuries this year. Jordan Phillips is out and continues to play through that shoulder injury. Ed Oliver's got that brace. He's playing through some stuff. The luxury that the Buffalo Bills had to start the season has all but evaporated, and the Buffalo Bills were not able to get any amount of pass rush on the Miami Dolphins and on Skylar Thompson without simulated creeper pressures from the linebackers of Teron Johnson. And that's something that's going to have to continue into the Bengals, and hopefully if we win, into the Chiefs game. The Buffalo Bills cannot depend on 4 men to rush the passer anymore.
It's going to be tough, and that's not what you want to do against teams like the Bengals and the Chiefs. So, like, we know that if there's anyone, if not better, against the blitz or against more than 4-man pressure than Josh Allen, it's Patrick Mahomes, right? And Joe Burrow has T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, Hayden Hurst. Like, it's going to have to be a very calculated risk reward situation for the Bills to bring more than 4. And if they're not getting pressure with 4, like they weren't against the Dolphins, against the depleted Dolphins offensive line, by the way. And by the way, the Bengals offensive line will also be depleted next week, as it certainly appears. But Joe Burrow, since early in the season, has been one of the best about getting rid of the ball, and has not taken as many sacks as of late as he had early in the season. So the Bills really need to try. I think they need to try to start the game by trying to get pressure with 4 and see how it goes against that depleted Bengals O-line. But it is not. You open up to risk, right? And that's the whole thing. And obviously, not having Vaughn for this stretch is why you got him, was for the playoffs ultimately, and not having him is killer.
I mean, this is crazy, but let's have this conversation. Dave Arizzi comes in and says, I don't know why Kingsley Jonathan doesn't get playing time. Gregory Rousseau, first-round pick. Shaq Lawson, former first-round pick. Boogie Basham, former second-round pick. AJ Epinesa, former second-round pick. I'm not criticizing any of these players in the sense that Gregory Rousseau is an elite run defender, and I also think he's a really good getting those garbage wrap-up sacks. There's a place for that. He'll be an 8 to 10 sack player every year. He will be an elite run defender, but he's not the kind of guy you're going to rely on like you would a Von Miller or a TJ Watt or a Trey Hendrickson. He's not going to be that guy. It's not him. Shaq Lawson is another guy who's going to get 4 to 6 sacks every year, be really good setting the edge. And it seems like Boogie Basham and AJ Epinesa are just those sort of like, we'll set the edge, we'll stop the run, and like every once in a while we'll maybe get somewhat of a pulse in a pass rush. And we've put so much draft capital into that. And now we're sitting here, and Dave Arizzi's comment, should an undrafted free agent from the practice squad get some playing time because he's the only one who legitimately gets any sort of semblance of a pass rush pop. We have to have this conversation. It's difficult, especially this time of year.
It is. And I think Greg Rousseau is awesome, but he's not the pass rusher that Von Miller is. He's not the pass rusher, the organic pass rusher or the natural pass rusher necessarily. He's a very complete defensive end. He's got the length, he's got size, but he's not the guy that's going to typically be the guy that's getting you 2 sacks a game, right? He might get you a sack, and that's great, but he's going to be your complete defensive end. So they don't really have that guy right now, the Bills, who's that pass rushing type specialist, right? It's not AJ Epinesa. It's not Boogie Basham. It's not Shaq Lawson. We know that.
Yeah.
So it's a collection of really pretty solid edge players, but you don't have that pass rushing specialist that you're really kind of missing right now.
Yeah. And RJ comes in so he says Gruder's been great this year according to pass rush, win rate, run defense, perfect DNs outside of Vaughn. 100% agree with that. And he's the perfect complement to Vaughn. But now without Vaughn, you go and you look at the other side, and Charles D says Shaq has played great, in my opinion. I agree. Shaq has played well, but he hasn't. It's as he's a wave defensive end. He's not a starting defensive end, and he doesn't make a starting defensive end's impact. He makes a good guy off the bench to play for 35-40% of your snaps type of impact. The Buffalo Bills are lacking sort of that oomph that Von Miller or previously Jerry Hughes had provided, and that's just not there right now. It's just a bunch of wave guys and Gregory Rousseau who needs another guy across from him. So it's very difficult. And Charles G says, where's that Oliver at? I legitimately think his injury is still affecting him because he's still wearing that brace on his arm. And obviously Jordan Phillips has an injury that I think is still affecting him. And he even missed this week because of it. So it's just like the wear and tear of the season has taken a toll on this defensive line.
And look, I mean, Rashid's back. He says Jerry Hughes. Oh my God.
Sorry, Rashid. I didn't mean to trigger you.
He hates Jerry Hughes, but that's okay.
Jerry Hughes is a better pass rusher than AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, and Boogie Basham. All I'm trying to say, Rashid. He's a better pass rusher. Look up his stats this year in Houston. He had what, 10 sacks?
The fact of the matter is that you just can't replace Von Miller, right? Like it was all this like, oh, can the collective unit kind of like, it's just not like you can't. You don't have the guys. You don't have the type of player, even like a specialist that's like him. Like he's one of a kind. That's why you got him. That's why you paid him all that money. He's one of a kind. You don't have him. Can you still win without him? Yes, you can. Is the task going to be harder? Yes, it absolutely will be. That's why you went out and got him. It is going to be harder. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean you can't win. But we're kind of now back to having a little bit of that same conversation that we've had in years past about like, okay, pressure is great, but eventually you got to take down the quarterback, right? And that's why you got Von Miller, was to seal the deal. So Walter says, I roll my eyes when we start talking pressure instead of sacks because it means increasingly less when it comes to the best quarterbacks.
And that's why we went and got Von Miller.
Exactly.
And now he's not available. And that's just, it sucks. It sucks because there was a great comment earlier from, I believe it might've been Charles G, or someone made a great comment earlier about just how you can't, Charles G, you can't blitz Burrow. You got to get organic pressure, and it's tough to get organic pressure with the guys that we have. And then again, where does the frustration level come from? Bill's fever hits it on the head here. Where the frustration comes from is all the draft picks and money spent on this D line, and we still don't have the pass rusher. We had to go out and we had to mortgage our future and sign Von Miller. Now he's hurt. And now all of those other guys that we use draft capital on, first round picks, second round picks, they're not cutting it. And I'm not saying they're bad. They're just average. And that's a problem. And Mattis says, since he's missing 3 starting offensive linemen, that does play in our favor. But guess what? Miami was playing a bunch of scrubs on that offensive line too. And they were playing a guy they signed off the practice squad that week at left guard. And we were still struggling to do it. So that's, I think, where a lot of the frustration comes from. So let's lighten the mood and let's go back to arrow up. And let's move back to offense here. And I want to talk about the skill position guys, because outside of the drops, I think we finally got Josh Allen spreading the ball out. And I think we finally saw some positives from the weapons outside of Stephon Diggs. We talked at length on this show about the reason why the Buffalo Bills added John Brown and Cole Beasley, in my opinion, was to sort of mimic Sanders and Beasley and take the pressure off of Gabriel Davis. You're not going to mimic 2021 Sanders and Beasley production, but maybe you can mimic moments, right? And I think we saw some of those moments in the game. Cole Beasley's touchdown, Cole Beasley's third down completion. Some of those moments were mimicked, and I think that freed up Gabriel Davis to go off and have his 6 for 113 and a touchdown. You look at some of the statistics, Diggs 7 for 114. I'm predicting on the show he'd go for 200. I honestly thought he was going to do it, and then he sort of slowed down. Davis 6 for 113 and a touch. Kaiir 3 for 51. Beasley 2 for 25 and a touch. Both of those catches were so clutch. Knox 3 for 20 and a touchdown. And then Quentin Morris and Nyheim Hines each added a catch, 1 for 12 yards, 1 for 7 yards. So the Buffalo Bills finally spread the ball around. Playoff Gabe showed up. We had 2 100-plus yard receivers. Who knows if Khalil Shakir catches that pass? Maybe we have 3. And maybe there's 5 touchdowns we're talking about if Khalil Shakir catches that ball and Dawson Knox catches that ball. So I think outside of those drops, a really, really solid day from the wide receiving core.
Yeah, and I like how you put it, like snippets of what we had, right? And like the Cole Beasley touchdown to me kind of was the culmination of that, or at least a highlight for me, because it was a red zone play. It was like inside the 5-yard line or whatever. I can't remember exactly what yard line it was on, but it wasn't a play where it's like Josh is back there, standing around, surveying, scrambling out of the pocket and making some kind of miraculous throw for a touchdown, a la that end of the first half against Miami the last time we played them, right, to James Cook. This was a very deliberately designed play to Cole Beasley, who ran just an incredible route and was able to sneak into the end zone. And to me, that gives me hope, because that's play calling right there that says, okay, we don't need Cole Beasley to be the 8 to 10 target a game guy like he was 2 years ago. But if we can have plays in the arsenal like that for him, including, by the way, the third down play, which the route was absolutely sick. It was like a double.
Yeah.
It was like a double juke to the right before he cut back in. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, that's huge, right? And like you said, with Kaiir stepping up as well, and obviously had the drop, but like, look, he still contributed in a meaningful way with over 50 receiving yards in this game. And then, like you said, playoff Gabe showing up as well, making that big catch where the Dolphins challenged, and it obviously, or the Bills challenged, excuse me, and it was, Dolphins challenged? No, the Bills challenged, and it got overturned to a catch, I think, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but it wasn't just Stephon Diggs, and I think that's the main point here.
Yeah.
And so there is some confidence on that front that can be taken into next week.
And that's the big thing too, right? Like taking the pressure off of Stephon Diggs. You saw the Bills with the ability to take the pressure off of Diggs and take the pressure off of Gabriel Davis. I think taking the pressure off of Gabriel Davis might be even more important than taking it off of Stephon Diggs. Like, I still think that there needs to be an overhaul this offseason. I think we need to add another receiver to this room to go along with Davis, Kaiir, and Diggs, into the future. But that's obviously a conversation for another day. Another sort of little interesting wrinkle here, Jamison Crowder could come back next week. Maybe Jamison Crowder fills into John Brown's spot. Who knows how the Buffalo Bills work that, but we could have Jamison Crowder here in the next couple of weeks if the Buffalo Bills continue to advance.
Yeah, and that just adds another player to the mix, right? And so, you get to the point where you're like, okay, is it too many guys to try to work in? But you're cobbling something together here that you need to go on a run for 3 more games. So even if it is 1, 2, 3 catches a game for some of these guys, 1, 2, 3 targets, like, those could be meaningful plays in big moments in some of these games that could be the difference between winning and losing. So these guys have to be ready when their numbers are called, even if it's in low volume. And we know that, that's going to be fine for guys like Beasley at this stage of their career. And even like Kaiir, who hasn't been super integrated into the offense yet. They just have to be ready when their numbers called and have to deliver if they get those, if they get the ball thrown their way. So, and really going to be really important.
Yeah, and the broadcasters mentioned this a couple of times. Tony Romo mentioned this a couple of times. I think it's also important to note, like, there was a lot of Dawson Knox and Quentin Morris on the field at the same time, a lot of 12 personnel. Bobby Hart came onto the field a decent number of times. And even though Cook's numbers don't look great because there was a couple of carries there at the end that really brought down the average, he went 12 for 39 and a touch. He made some nice chunk runs. Devin Singletary, 10 for 48. No catches from the running backs in this game. A lot of pass blocking responsibilities with this cover 0. But the Bills were able to take some of the pressure off of Josh Allen in this game, and they were able to run the football against the number 1 DVOA rushing team when the other team knew that they were going to run it, when they were in some of these obvious running situations. So kudos to the Buffalo Bills. Was it perfect? No, but they were able to get some chunk plays on the ground, and the running game continues to improve under Ken Dorsey and Aaron Kromer and become something that's not sort of dependent on Josh Allen and the offense, being successful in order for them to be successful. They can sort of, even when the defense knows it's coming, be successful on their own. So that's always a good thing to see. My only arrow down for the offense outside of what we've already talked about, the turnovers, and we've already sort of mentioned it a little bit, is the pass blocking. 7 sacks allowed. Not a great day from this unit. Again, they're starting to be exposed by teams like the Patriots and the Dolphins here. 5-man rushes, they can't handle it. Some of these disguising who's coming, they can't handle it. Keeping those defensive tackles home, not pushing them upfield, gives Josh Allen some fits. The pass blocking could be this team's downfall. What are your thoughts on that unit as a whole?
I mean, especially in a situation where you're trying to hit some of these low percentage deep balls, like that pass protection the quality of the pass protection is not really lining up with some of that. So look, I think that in a lot of those situations in the past, Josh's been able to mask that by stepping up and through and making plays on the ground with his legs, but he wasn't able to do that in this game. So like part of me is like, okay, maybe the pass protection doesn't have to be perfect if Josh can make plays with his legs, but if he's not able to even do that because the protection's so bad and things are just collapsing, that's going to be a problem, right? I think once you start to see the pass protection affect Josh's ability to make plays off script, that's when things really become a problem. And so not a lot off script in this game, right, for him.
Yeah.
So 7 sacks, as you mentioned, and obviously the huge touchdown deep in their own zone that Miami was able to recover. Like that just compounds it. And so pass protection is going to be a problem. We know the Bengals are coming in with Hendrickson here next week. So, it's probably going to be one of the key matchups we talk about when we do the pregame.
Yeah. Speaking of the pregame, we will be back on Sunday morning to break down the Buffalo Bills, Cincinnati Bengals. Rightfully, the game is being played in Buffalo, despite what some people on social media want to say. When two teams have played the same amount of games and have the same record, the team with the better, or I'm sorry, don't have the same record. The team with the better record has the home game. That just makes sense. And I don't understand anyone's argument for why this game should be on a neutral field. I think some of these Cincinnati folk and some of these national media folk need to shut the hell up. But I'm going to keep that one to myself. Oh, did I say it out loud? I didn't mean to. Sorry. But on to Cincinnati, as Bill Belichick would say. They also allowed a division rival with a backup quarterback to stick around. They lose that game if Greg Roman isn't a total idiot and tries to run a ball in the flat to Patrick Ricard, who weighs like 320 pounds, and then tries to have his like 5'10", 195-pound quarterback jump over the offensive line from like a yard and a half out. When you have like Gus Bus and J.K. Dobbins and you have a lead blocker like Patrick Ricard and you can't just run the ball 3 times and score a touchdown. I don't know, Greg Roman. Sounds pretty dumb to me, but the Bengals come away with a win there in Cincinnati. The biggest news that came out of that game, in my opinion, was Jonah Williams with a dislocated kneecap. Lyle Collins already tore his ACL. Ted Karras came out today and stated that the Bengals are approaching this game like they're not going to have Williams and Collins and also right guard Alex Kappa, who missed that game with an injury. So the Bengals are down their left tackle, their right guard, and their right tackle. Can the Bills, Sans, Von Miller take advantage?
Theoretically, yes, but this isn't Skylar Thompson. This is Joe Burrow. You're going against one of the MVP, shortlist MVP candidates with probably the best weapons of any team in the NFL. So, again, it's going to be pick your poison for the Bills in this game. Do you try to, knowing that you don't have the best pass rushing unit, like a good defensive line, but not the best pass rushing unit? Do you try to pull a Bengals and maybe rush 3, rush 4, and just still try to drop everyone back and hope that you can make a stop and make the Bengals sort of like have to drive 15 plays down the field on you? Or do you try to create negative plays against Joe Burrow by bringing an extra man? And I think, to me, I think the Bills are probably going to try to at least start the game with rushing only 4 and see how it goes. But in theory, yes, they can take advantage. But we saw just this game against the Dolphins with a very depleted offensive line, they weren't really able to. So I don't know what my confidence level right now is on their ability to take advantage.
Yeah, so we have that. And then just like a brief look at the opposite side of the ball, the Dolphins, in my opinion, have a better defense than the Bengals do. And the Buffalo Bills put up 34 points on the Dolphins. So I'm not worried that playoff Josh, playoff Gabe, playoff Stefan are going to show up. Hubbard and, Hendrickson give me pause. Jermaine Pratt is a very good player. Obviously, Logan Wilson's a very good player. But I don't doubt the Buffalo Bills' ability to move the football on this Cincinnati Bengals football team. They need to do 2 things. What they couldn't do on the first drive against the Bengals, score in the red zone. They got to convert in the red zone. And number 2, they can't turn the ball over. But I'm not worried about the Buffalo Bills' ability to keep pace with the Cincinnati Bengals if this turns into a shootout. Are you at all worried?
I'm not worried, but I also don't want it to be a situation where like the Bills defense can't stop Joe Burrow at all, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't want it to feel like the Bills have to score a touchdown on every single possession. Like that's not the feeling I want to have during the game. If it ends up being that type of game and they do play lights out on offense and they do end up winning, like cool, like that's fine. But I don't want to have that feeling where I feel like the Bills have to score a touchdown on every single drive or it feels like they're losing. Like that, I don't want that feeling.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said, we will be back Sunday morning with your Cover One pregame show. Bills, Bengals. Cannot encourage you enough if you haven't already. The number one way you can support us in this show is to sign up for the Cover One Pass Club access. You get this cool, awesome shirt, decal, behind the scenes stuff with guys like Eric and Anthony on these Zoom calls and these private YouTube shows. So you get exclusive members only content. You get access on unlimited devices. You get access to us here in the Cover One community, the private Slack channel, etc., and a whole bunch of behind the scenes content. So if you're looking to support Cover One, get your Cover One Pass Club Access Premier membership for just $57 a year. And as I said, we're trying to grow this thing organically. So if you enjoy the conversations that we're having on the show, we always try to keep it real. We don't try to be too reactionary. I save that for Twitter. I save the reactionary stuff for Twitter and try to bring a level head to the show. Someone actually said that the other day. They're like, how are you this way on the show and that way on social media? And I say it's because I let all my stupid shit out on social media and then I gather myself before we come out on the show. So we try to bring a level head. If you enjoy what's going on here, hit that share button at the bottom, copy, paste the link, email it to friends, family, whoever you think, coworkers, whoever you think would enjoy this show, or even the audio version, this podcast as well. You could find that over at Air Raid Buffalo. Smash that like before you head out. If you're watching on demand, leave a comment in the comments section. We'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. And until next time, Dave, go Bills.
Go Bills.